last workshop session today, and this is about controllers' compliance with the accountability principle. As you may remember, there are principles for data processing, and accountability is one of these principles. And the main sense of this principle is that any controller has to be able to demonstrate compliance with the data protection regulations. So it means that the controller should have appropriate documentation about that, right? So, of course, demonstration of compliance with the data protection procedure can be made in any other, by many by many other ways, but usually the controller has to have a documentation about personal data processing in its content.
So as we've talked before about it, we hoped that GDPR will ease the burden of documentation, but unfortunately it didn't. Our supervisory authority have a long list of, I suppose, 15 different types of documents which should be provided by every controller in order to be compliant with GDPR and the I don't know how to say it, with the obligation made by our supervisory authority, which does not have any legal ground in any act, nor in GDPR, not in our Data Protection Act. One of those documents are risk assessment notes, risk assessment protocols, of course DPIA. There are a lot of different types of documents which of course should be, which of course somehow we should provide evidence that we did risk assessment. But GDPR doesn't tell us how to do it, and our supervisory authority kind of thinks that we should do it on paper with signature. As I understood correctly, the outcome of website, which with newly opened supervisory authority from I think June last year. Unfortunately or fortunately, this site is quite hidden at the supervisory authority website, because they are now promoting the new recruitation for their own employers, because they're searching for people as we speak. So this is quite problematic for our clients, and to show them how to, or that they should provide certain type of documentation to be respectful and to respect the needs from our supervisory authority.
So one more issue. Before GDPR in Poland, we had an act on personal data protection, and under our previous act, we had every controller had an obligation to have two documents.
Which were defined, like, yes, strictly.
Very strictly defined in supporting regulations to the Act. And these documents were security policy, and the security policy was a document which was defining the main principles of personal data processing in the company in very general manner. And the second document was the instruction for the management of IT system, which defined how the IT system should be managed as regards the safeguards and regards the personal data flows between the systems, etc.
And those regulation defines how should the password look like. So it should have 8 numbers and letters and capital letter, and it should be changed every 30 days, as I can recall. So we have like rules.
Screen savers.
Yeah, we have rules from our regulator on how to protect data. Those protection was not very real,
But it's standardized.
but it was
Every controller in Poland has these 2 documents, and they were very similar to each other.
yeah, like practically the same, because those regulations kind of hand out all the obligations. So basically, when our supervisory authority came to our to our controllers to control them, they basically said that okay, everything is great if you have those 2 documents, you're compliant. So as you know, as you may imagine, the data protection in Poland was quite
So when the GDPR
existing.
came into force, the controllers in Poland was quite panicked because of that, because GDPR doesn't have so strict and specific regulations.
It wants lawyers to be creative, so we got panic.
GDPR just
We went
says
panic.
that the security should be appropriate. And what does it mean? Nobody knows that. And the previous situation was much more comfortable for data controllers. GDPR, in fact, doesn't require controllers to have these 2 documents, but in practice, it is that every controllers in Poland still have these 2 documents because they already had them, and made additional documents to be compliant with GDPR. So at the moment,
There is a mess.
the controllers in Poland has security policy and instruction for management of IT system. Everybody has that. And additionally, some other documents which are specifically required by GDPR. So this is how it looks like. These other documents, and of course, there was a huge discussion when the GDPR came into force, whether we can remain our safeguards which we have introduced under previous regulations. For example, as regards the password. The controllers were asking whether we still should change the password every 13 days, because GDPR doesn't require so. And some of them changed this rule, and this is not used anymore in many companies, because it gives no guarantee that nobody will steal your password, bless you, and will use logins and passwords to get an access to the IT system. Much more effective solution is to make a system of noticing about unauthorized logins to the system. And this is how it works right now. There is no further obligation to change the password every 13 days.
We have a very interesting discussion in Poland whether we could be compliant with GDPR and with the accountability principle with other than written documents. So and there are lawyers in Poland, which is quite well known. I'm thinking about Mr. Gabroński, who was a member of Article 29 Working Party, who says that it is possible to be compliant with the accountability principle using only like the system, IT system. So we can have everything logged in we can have every documentation needed in the IT system, because GDPR doesn't say that we should have everything on paper stored somewhere in filing system in a closet composed by I don't know, some kind of locking mechanism. But unfortunately our supervisory authority tends to think otherwise. So we have the time of thinking about it, because it's quite a risk, as you may imagine. I would say that we can provide documentation on IT systems, and we can do it in IT systems, because, as you may already know, there are tons of let's say IT systems which helps with to be GDPR compliant, which helps us with data processing activities, with other documentation, providing other stuff. But unfortunately, I advise to my clients that they should have something on paper, because the obligation and fines are very strict, so it's easier.
So as we said previously, before GDPR in Poland we had very strict instructions in law how to be compliant with personal data protection. Now we don't have. So now the controllers have to make work on its side to determine what kind of measures and what kind of security safeguards are appropriate for their kind of business to protect the personal data. So this is what previously controllers don't have to do, as they had regulations about that. Now it is on the controller's side to determine the appropriate level of personal data security in their enterprises, and of course they have to be able to demonstrate how they came to the conclusions of what they finally think is appropriate level of security measures.
Okay, so
And
maybe
this is
let's make a short case study on these examples. How would you document or provide proof that you are making amend to the obligation mentioned right here? So let's start with data protection by design. We should be able to provide an evidence that we, let's say as controllers, maintain data protection by design to every and each scenario of newly made data processing operation, and as I understood correctly from Article 29 of the Working Party, those which are present as well. So how would you do that? Data processing can be anything, like marketing, like preparing opinion, like HR, human resources operations.
Usually the easy answer is to have a policy that shows that you have at least thought about it.
Very good.
the easiest answer is to hire a lawyer and a technical guy to make a due diligence, right? And then you will have a very concrete evidence that someone has investigated your type of business and try to foresee what risks are connected with this kind of personal data processing and what measures should be taken to mitigate potential risk in the future, right? And many companies do like that, right? It is the easiest way, because by such action you can shift the risk from your company to someone else, right? the expert have told me that it's enough, so we took it as a true and accurate.
Okay, but what about more sophisticated systems, more sophisticated actions, more sophisticated operations? When we are really designing something like software, and we're sitting here as privacy lawyers, what would you suggest to your client how they should document it? They should thought before making an action with this system, before using this system, IT system, some other operation, that they thought about data protection before using this one. How would you document?
I would suggest that in each stage they would write down the alternatives and exclude the ones, this would be obvious, which are excluded due to privacy concerns during each stage. And the ones that will be left would be the ones that are pro data protection.
Yes.
So if anyone in the end has a doubt that you didn't think about it, you would say that you went first.
Yeah, show it. Another thing which I recommended when there is nothing yet, we don't have any policy about it, is to document it by exchanging emails. We can work in group and exchange emails. We can record some exchange of thoughts from any other communicator like Asana, which helps with managing projects, with like Slack. We have the option to. So therefore, we can do it in electronic means, but it's harder than to do it on the document. So basically, what we should do is to make a simple risk analysis, and when the risk analysis will tell us that everything is okay, we're good to go. But this principle is also provided by in GDPR by European legislator, because when we at this point know that this certain type of operation will risk in a high level of risks to freedom and rights of data subjects, we should do a data privacy impact assessment and think if we should process data in this kind of operations. So this is first.
This data protection by design is the most difficult, in my opinion, is the most difficult element in this new approach to the personal data protection, because you have to figure out proactively what are the risks of the personal data protection for the personal data privacy and how they can be mitigated or minimalized. So this is something which you don't know whether it can happen in the future, but you try to foresee the risks and the safeguards for them. What we also propose to our clients is to make analyze of market level. Try to get an information how this that personal data processing is made on the market. What is the standard market level of the security measures in this kind of business? For example, if you are going to establish some security for your IT system, there is a lot of different solutions. There is a lot of types of security measures which can be adopted, and you cannot foresee which one will be appropriate. So you can simply ask some hosting companies what is their offer how they protect the infrastructure, and it can show you the market level of the security protection on this field, because you can assume that hosting company is up to date as regards the security measures, right?
Maybe go back to this table. One more additional, I think, interesting information is that the police directive brings another obligation to the controllers, which is logging. Logging is a kind of interesting obligation, because when we are thinking about automated means, the data processing by automated means in filing system, we should log everything in our system. So therefore, this is like I would say the most foregoing, most burdening obligation which we could possibly think of when it comes to data processing. But it can be, of course, automated. Therefore, we don't have it in GDPR. This is the only thing new made by this police directive possible. So police have to have like a system which covers the logging, so recording the every event made on the file, on the personal data in the system. So therefore we can have like full scale of history with every activity made on personal data. So having such system is, let's say, I would say quite problematic, because it's costly, and I'm not sure if public entities have such systems in their own on their own. So this is quite.
But from my practice result, under GDPR, the controllers also expect that the logging will be part of the IT systems or IT software. For example, these controllers which are more sensitive for personal data processing, they requires the providers of the software that the software has the function of logging, just to track every move in the software, who was processing the personal data in a specific manner. So this is something what is more common. It is much more common right now, that everybody are trying to keep the track of every personal data processing activity in the system. And I think it will be under GDPR. We will have to be prepared that this level of security will be going higher and higher, because the technology is developing all the time, and the risks are. It caused that the risks are also higher. So it should have appropriate impact on the security over the personal data processing. So I think that logging will be also common in the normal business too. Of course, there is also the question how deep this logging should go, right? Because of course you don't have to track every move on the computer. It's enough that you will be tracking move in the software in which you are processing the personal data. Is this designed by default?
Yeah. So one other thing is data protection by default, which is say the extension of data minimization principle, and it applies to the amount of personal data collected, the extent of the processing, and the storage period and accessibility. The easiest example or case study for such an action when it comes to the websites was the checkboxes. We all know the websites in which all the checkboxes were automatically checked. And when we were trying to register to any kind of type of service, or when we wanted to buy something, we were not actively, passively consenting to yes, whatever. Therefore, under GDPR and under this principle, this is not legal at this point of time. Therefore, we cannot do it at all. So, of course, we changed our policy. Maybe not policy. We changed our perspective. We changed it at our website and system. How can we prove that we've done it? And at which point of time we've done it? Because when I'm working in this field for some time, and when I asked once a year ago, yeah, it was 2017, so a year and some ago, one of clients, do you record who consented to the data processing on your website when you do the recruitment phase from your website? They say no. When someone sends data, we don't check whether someone checked the checkbox or not. I was amazed. So I asked, so why did you put it out? I mean, what for? If you don't log it, if you don't have this information, whether someone checked this checkbox or not, what for? Because there is an obligation to do so, but no one checks if the consent was given or not. So what for, right?
So this is the matter of the accountability principle, because even if you will try to state that someone have consent for personal data processing, you cannot demonstrate it, right?
Yeah.
It cannot be demonstrated, so it is like you don't have a consent.
That's true. That's true. So therefore, we have to somehow.
I just instruct. For me, it's obvious. It's a basic. Even before GDPR. So when we think about tables in database, I always tell my clients to project all the attributes, including if there was a consent or not. Also, I instruct to take some kind of fingerprint, because somebody could say, okay, your admin could just put checkbox, and you just put one in Boolean table, and but actually we collect more data to prove that there was some action from the client, and it was and there was a consent. Yeah. So it's if you just put checkbox just for for show off, it doesn't make any sense.
True.
And you don't cover yourself.
That's true. Okay, so next thing is data protection impact assessment. So the first question is if we as legal practitioners may be subject to data protection impact assessments. And what do you think? Do we process data in processing activities which may need the data protection impact assessment? No one wants to say yes.
Because answer is no.
I would say that maybe. Of course, it depends. It depends. I believe that when we think and talk about big company, big legal firm, which is processing data on a large scale, and we also don't know what large scale processing is. So we have a lot of lawyers in this law firm. I would say so that they should do DPIA, and they do it in Poland in bigger company law firms. I've seen such activities, and yeah, they've done data protection impact assessment. And I don't know if you know it, but French supervisory authority SNIL gives out for free software which helps to make data privacy impact assessment, and it's accessible on the site of SNIL. So it's easier to make this kind of assessment. If you want it, just send me an email. I will provide it to you, the link. They some privacy expert from Poland even translated it to Polish language because it's open source, so we can make everything out of it. So, but I'm sure it's in French and it's in English. So, it's very good. I use it from time to time, so I could recommend it. Okay, so
could you show it tomorrow, for instance?
I can do it. Yeah, I can show it tomorrow.
Because I got the same friend. I know what you're talking about,
perfect.
but I haven't practiced this software yet.
Okay. I don't think that we'll be able to make everything go through every point, but I will show you something without the actual data protection impact assessment report, because we won't be able to go that far.
But of course, data protection impact assessment, it's not only a document, right? It shouldn't be made only by simply making a document which name is data protection impact assessment. Data protection impact assessment is a process. Means that in the course of projecting something new, what is intended to process the personal data in large scale, you should take the personal data protection into consideration in that process. So data protection impact assessment can be regular meetings when the members of some council will be discussing some problems which can be associated with this new project, and they will be trying to solve them out, and they will be proposing some solutions. So data protection impact assessment generally is a process of solving some issues which can arise with a new project from the perspective of the personal data protection. The other question is how to document this, right? So this is the moment when we have to write it down, or at least write down the conclusions of this whole process. But also data protection impact assessment can be simple the notes from the regular meetings. Right? This is also a data protection impact assessment because it shows that the council of people were meeting regularly and trying to solve the future problems which they foresee to be connected with a specific project, right?
Yeah, we have the link to this software here. Yeah.
Data protection officer.
Okay, so another thing, I've read it on our data protection officers forum. We have Facebook in Poland. We have Facebook forum for DPOs, and it's quite active forum. So someone asked the question, how we should assess whether we need, and document whether we need DPO or not. Because there are certain type of obligations, certain types of things that that brings us to the question if we need DPO or not. So let's say that we don't need DPO and we're having one. Can we do that? Yes. But the real question is, what came up for us to this idea of having one? are we scared of GDPR? So someone was scared to that limit that was starting to, asking questions on how to document it, why they should have DPO. I, to be honest, didn't perceive it as a problem. So to be honest, I don't have such documentation. I mean, none of my clients have such documentation. But the question is where to the other question is where to stop. Okay. So how to document having a DPO agreement would be the easiest one, because we should have one with DPO, and we should remember about writing good, appropriate obligations to DPO, and we should also, which was quite an issue to me in one of project, we should document that we put DPO in right place in the whole structure of companies. Because when we have more than one company, or we have one company with quite problematic internal structure of the company, we should think about where to put DPO in order to give him freedom to act as an let's say advisor on privacy, and not a slave to some director in some lower field of in some lower organization unit, right? So we should think about how to document it, right? I think that when we're talking about outsourcing BPO, so someone who is let's say expert in the field, and she's also conducting a business, like one person business, he can be he can act, and you can leave it with the agreement. And when you're employing BPO, we should think about where to put this person, under who? Under the board, under president. Maybe he should be a member of the board, and unfortunately, it always depends on how the controller looks like, his structure. Because in smaller companies, it may be. I think that such employer may be basically everywhere when he's free to act. But when we're talking about bigger companies, we should also think about DPO and the unit for DPO, because one person will not be sufficient, and this person may be even a part of a member of the board, or a director of some kind.
Usually in the companies, in order to appoint a DPO, the management board takes a resolution. This is a standard practice, that this kind of decision is serious enough to get a decision in the form of management board resolution, and such resolution is also a proof that we have a DPO, and is also proof for the management board that part of their responsibilities were moved to someone else. Because if the DPO is appointed in the company, he takes the responsibility from the management board, and in my opinion, this DPO should report directly to the management board, because DPO is because personal data protection issues are attributable to the controller, so in fact to the management board. So if they are moved to someone else, this person should be right under the management board, not in some other department or under some director, right? Because this person should be independent, just like attorney at law or the employee responsible for health and safety conditions in the workplace. So this is more or less similar responsibility where the employee inside is independent, has to be independent to perform his tasks properly. So this is the part which discuss the organizational measures which can be adopted by the controller to safeguard the personal data processing. After the controller makes this analysis about the potential risk of personal data processing in the company, then there is a decision what kind of measures we should adopt to avoid this risk, or at least to mitigate this risk.
Examples are dutiful management of access authorization, and this is the one that I would suggest to implement, so that we know who has the access to what. It may be easy, or it may sound simple, but when you try to do it in an organization who doesn't do it, it's a disaster and it's a nightmare. Really, I'm going through this as we speak. In one client where around 150 workers were just employees were just going to IT section and was asking to have an access to something. They were just giving it out. Why not, right? But you know, this company processes a lot of data. I mean, a very high amount of data, and yeah, it is a disaster. So let's just say that you should try to do it.
Yeah, from practice we have a client who is a software producer, and then provides maintenance services, and therefore this client has an access to the personal data of all his clients. So there are two issues as regards the access to this data. First of all, who should have access? Of course, not all employees of our client, because it is too risky to give the access to all of them, because there is always a risk that someone from this person will just take this data and do something unlawfully. And the second issue is whether the access should be permanent or temporary. It's better that it is temporary and it is given on demand. But if the employee needs an access to the data, it is given to he or she. And when it is not needed anymore, the access is closed, and there is no one who have an access to the data. But all this should be determined in the policy, right? In the company's policy. At the first stage of data protection by design, the company should identify the risk of giving an access to everyone, and should conclude that it is too risky to give the access to clients' data for all the employees, and then should specify how to mitigate this risk. For example, by giving the access only to one person, and this access should be temporary, that it will be closed where there is no need, there's no further need to have this.
Okay, one other thing, training and education of employees. I conduct training courses at least once a year for my clients. So he organizes, and it depends how big the company is, because I believe that the group of 20-30 people is maximum in order to do this be effective. But of course we can also, or we should also divide that company for different types of processing. Like we have a branch of marketing or marketing unit, we have IT unit, and when we mix them up, no one will be interested in what we want to speak to about. So basically, think about it. Who are your audience? Then another thing is there is two types of trainings in my opinion. So first one is general ones when we just talk about GDPR and talk about how to get the basic information about data protection or privacy to our to our clients, to their employees. So this is the first one, and from this first one we can hear about problems which those people have, and from this moment, and I believe this is the best way to start now it. From this moment we have quite a lot of material to make an audit, to make an offer for an audit, and afterwards we can make a different type of training. This training could involve manuals and instructions and information about how to support a controller when it comes to really processing data in this exact organization. Of course, preparing for this second type of training should take more time, because we have to align what our client needs and what we should talk about. But it's more it's better for them. It's they will have a lot more outcome from such training than from this basic one. But those basics are also important, because employers are changing, and it will be happening indefinitely, and we will have the people who doesn't heard about GDPR at all. So we also have to provide such an information from the beginning of the lecture. Okay, so
one of our clients asked us whether he can exchange the training for the confirmation of the read of the procedure. And even this client even has a very fine software in which different procedures were embedded, and then employee received information that you have to come into the software. The procedure was shown to him. You have to scroll it down and confirm at the end of the document that he read it and understands this procedure and accept it for application. I think that's not enough. 90% of employees haven't read these procedures. They just scroll them down and clicked just to go forward with the software. That's normal, and nobody should expect that this kind of information will have the same result as a training.
That's true. That's true. And another thing is that we can use e-learning programs. I would encourage you to use ours, because I would say that it's quite interesting and well-made one. And it's quite short, as is general. Of course, the problem with learning programs are that we can fake them and go straight to the test and answer the questions. But when we want to learn, we just learn. When we know that we have someone who doesn't want to learn, we have to act for them. Okay, now next things are manuals and support in case of incident and errors. I've seen the suggestions that when it comes to reporting and security incidents, that we should just do it, and we should send the information to our supervisory authority without any analysis of it. So I would say that there are quite nice methodologies of how to analyze data breaches and incident and security incidents. One of them is made by European Network and ENISA. ENISA is methodology is one of them. I think it's from 2013 or 14, but it's still applicable up to this day. I use it in my practice. I would recommend you to use it as well. It's a very good one, and then we, after assessing the issue, we then know if we should inform the protection supervisor or authority or not, because I've read that our supervisory authority received a lot, on thousands of data breaches reports, and around 70% of them were wrongly written or inaccurately written. Therefore, this is the case. We should give out manuals and give out some kind of support, but support which is meaningful. Sorry, which will give some kind of tool to the people who will actually be assessing the risk of this data breach, who will be doing risk analysis, right? So, and there are a lot of methodologies we can use, which we can use. And then internal audits and monitoring structures. GDPR tells us that we should do it, but doesn't tell us how and when, stuff like that. So basically, what I found in practice that once in a year period of time is a good period of time, is a used period of time. I've seen once the situation when some controller wanted 1.5 years. But of course, this is a specific type of data processing, and it was a financial institution with quite high-tech, and it was quite a high-tech company, so they were doing a lot of changes in their software, so they wanted to do their audits more often.
But the audit don't have to be made physical, so it don't have to be a standard due diligence. In our practice, we saw that the audits were made in the form of questionnaire, and the controller prepared some questionnaires for the employees inside the organization, send it to them, and with the request to fill it, to answer the questions. And the questions were about the personal data protection issues or risk which were observed by them in some period. And I think it's okay to make an audit in this way, because we can also assess that the person who will know the issues and the problems with the personal data processing, which are in the practice, are the employees themselves, because they are dealing with them on the day-to-day basis. So I saw such practice, and I think it's fine to make an audit in this way by such an annual questionnaire or 1.5 year questionnaire sent to main users.
Okay. Cultivation of awareness to threats and security routines throughout the work environment. It's also quite easy. I would suggest to send them like a newsletter, privacy newsletter to our employees under, of course, legitimate interests of controller, which is a spam, more or less. I've heard and I've seen happenings, privacy happenings. It was also in a big tech company, so it may not be applicable to smaller companies because it costs something. But raising awareness is a very important issue, and we can do it like with everything. We can print posters. We can make leaflets and hand them over. We can also make these trainings, but more like more in funny way, like using GIFs, using videos, using absurdities over data protection regulation, which in Poland are always quite fast. So there are a lot of things how to do it, and every such training or cultivation of awareness brings us evidence on that we are compliant with GDPR, and we are okay when it comes to principle of accountability. Yeah, and because there we don't have any benchmarks, specific benchmarks in this matter, we can do it as we like. I personally give out and certificates of attendance for the trainees, and I ask them to sign a list of participants, and I'm covered that I did the training at this day, at this time, and all the people signed it, and I have the proof that it was made.
And as we said previously, this accountability principle requires the controller to be able to demonstrate that personal data protection is in place, and the controller should have documents for that. There is no benchmark, but there is only a rule that these measures should be appropriate, and this is something that was scary for the controllers at the first time, on the first side. But please keep in mind that this appropriate requirement is also can be also problematic for authorities, right? Because if they will come to the controller, they will see some documents, they will see some security measures, and they will came to the conclusion that they are not appropriate. They will have to say why. Right? So if the controller have the documents, if the controller have some measures, there is no general assessment that they are not accurate, that they are not appropriate. If the authority will decide to give a fine because the measures are not appropriate, it could be problematic for them to prove that it is not appropriate in a specific case. The case will be much easier for authority if there will be no documents at all, right? Because it is easy. There is no documents, so there is
a fine.
There is a breach and there is a fine. But if there are some documents, so okay, if you think they are not accurate, please tell me why you think that. So it's much more difficult for them to give a fine for the control.
Okay, going fast to the security. In 2017, our data protection supervisory authority made an assessment on the law firms, and they found out that around 70% of those law firms have a problem with securing the data. And I heard that this is not only the case for Poland, but majorly in the EU and US as well. So basically, we as lawyers think that the privacy is not problematic for us, or we don't have to be secure. We don't have to secure our IT systems, which is not true, unfortunately. We also have a quite big data breach in major law firm in Warsaw, in Poland. Also in 2017, this data breach somehow managed to push our data protection supervisory authority to hand something to the lawyers and check if we are data protection compliant or not. And they give out the opinion that we as lawyers should remember about constituting very general rules when it comes to the privacy. And as we had this conference last year about security of data by lawyers, and what I would suggest you that is the first thing, privacy filters on the computers, on laptops. It costs around 25 euros, and it brings a lot of privacy to your work. And it's not only privacy when it comes to data protection, but also our security of our legal profession. So ethically also will be covered. 3M company makes them, a lot of other companies as well. And it's we can buy it online. It will come up in 2 or 3 days. I truly recommend using it. Second one, passwords. We use very bad passwords. It's not that we don't use any passwords, but we use bad passwords. And I've seen a very great movie made by Edward Snowden. And he, in 30 seconds, he explained how to make very hard password, which is very easy to remember. We just have to put some stupid words which doesn't make any sense with them in a word. So I think that he was mentioning the English Queen is the most beautiful woman in the world, and he used 100% in the meaning of this sentence. This password was plus 20 signs. So basically, this is very hard to get to by a hacker and any other type of security software which may break this password. And it's easy to remember. And since then, I'm using this method to make my own passwords.
So now we all know your password.
No,